The gaslight had been on since Gresham. I figured I had maybe 20 miles left in the tank. Probably less, and the drive from my apartment to the Lloyd Center area was about 12. That left me enough to get there and maybe find a cheap station after if the job paid out tonight like Eugene said it would. My phone kept buzzing in the cup holder. I didn't look at it. I knew what it was. Same 3 numbers that had been calling all week. Lenders, collections, maybe the credit line I'd opened last spring when I thought the Fred Meyer gig would last longer than 4 months. That was before the panic attack in aisle 7. Before I spent 15 minutes sitting on a pallet of dog food trying to remember how to breathe while my supervisor stood there with her radio, asking if I needed her to call someone. I didn't go back after that. The last year had been cash security gigs, all of them. Under-the-table stuff, no benefits, no long-term. Guard work at pop-up events, 3-day stretches outside dispensaries. One guy paid me $100 to sit in his storage unit for 6 hours because he thought his ex was going to break in. She didn't. I sat there on a folding chair and read an old magazine I'd found under my bed. That was July. It was January now, and the gigs had dried up after Christmas. I kept running the numbers while I drove. Rent was due in 4 days. I had $370 in my checking account. My landlord, well, not my landlord exactly, just the woman whose name was on the envelope I shoved cash into every month, didn't take excuses. Thelma Richardson. I'd met her twice, once when I moved in, once when I was late in October. She didn't yell. She just stood there in my doorway and told me the late fee was $50, and that she didn't do payment plans. I paid it. The phone buzzed again. I turned the radio up. Some talk station I didn't care about. Just noise. Eugene's call had come in yesterday afternoon. I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number, but I was sitting in my apartment staring at my bank app, and I guess I was desperate enough to try anything. He sounded friendly, professional. He said his name twice. Said he worked for JLL. Said he had a one-night job if I was available and could I start tomorrow. I asked what it paid. He said $250 for an overnight watch. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Cash at the end of the shift. I said yes before he finished talking. He didn't ask for my name. Didn't ask for a single thing except whether I could be on time and whether I had a problem with old buildings. I told him I'd worked security before. He said great. He'd text me the address, and someone named Audrey would meet me at the loading dock at 10. That was it. I should have asked more questions. What kind of building? What kind of watch? Why cash? Why one night? But I didn't, because $250 meant rent and gas and maybe groceries, and I wasn't in a position to get picky. The address he sent was for the old Sears building off Multnomah. I knew it. Everyone in Portland knew it. It had been empty for years, just sitting there taking up space while the city argued about what to do with it. I'd driven past it a dozen times and never thought about it much. Big dead retail box. They all looked the same after a while. I took the off-ramp and pulled onto Multnomah, passing the shopping center that was still half lit even this late. A couple of cars in the lot. Not many. It was a Thursday, cold, and most people were probably home by now. The Sears building sat at the far end of the block. It was bigger than I remembered. 4 stories, dark except for a few construction lights on the ground floor. The windows on the upper floors were black. The main entrance was blocked off with plywood and caution tape. I kept driving until I saw the service road that ran along the side, then followed it around back to the loading bay. One other car in the lot. A gray SUV parked near the dock. I pulled in next to it and killed the engine. My phone buzzed again. I left it. Audrey was waiting by the bay door when I got out. She had a clipboard in one hand and a yellow sight jacket zipped up to her chin. Blonde hair pulled back tight. She looked tired, but not in a sloppy way. More like she'd been working long enough that tired was just her baseline now. "Craig?" she said. I nodded. "Audrey Jordan. Eugene said you'd be on time." She didn't smile, just turned and walked toward the door. "Come on, I've got another sight at 11. I followed her up the steps into the bay. The door was already propped open with a rubber wedge. Inside it smelled like dust and old concrete and something chemical I couldn't place. Paint thinner, maybe. She led me through a short hallway lined with empty shelving units, then stopped under a flickering work light someone had clipped to an exposed beam. She set the clipboard down on a metal cart and pulled 3 things out of her jacket pocket. A key ring with 2 keys on it, a heavy black flashlight, a folded piece of paper. "Keys are for the dock door and the manager's office on 3, she said, handing them over. "Flashlight's yours to keep. Batteries are new." I took them. The keys were warm from her pocket. She unfolded the paper and held it out. "Rules. Read them. Follow them. All of them." I looked at the sheet. It was printed on plain white paper, single-spaced, maybe 10 or 12 lines. The header just said, "Shift Protocol" in bold caps. "Is there something specific I'm watching for?" I asked. "No. You're just here overnight while the contractors are off-site. Building's been acting up after midnight and we need someone on premises until the alarms are back online." Acting up how? She looked at me for a second. Not annoyed exactly. More like she was deciding how much to say. Doors opening. Sounds. Electrical glitches. It's an old building mid-renovation and half the systems don't talk to each other anymore. Contractors are pulling wire all week and the alarms won't be live until Monday. She tapped the paper in my hand. That's why the rules are specific. Just follow them and you'll be fine. What if something happens? Like what? I don't know. A break-in, a fire. There's a radio in the office. Channel 3 reaches me. Channel 5 reaches the fire department if you need it. She checked her watch. I've got another site at 11. You're good from here. She turned to go. Wait, I said. What time do I get paid? End of shift. I'll be back at 6. Eugene said cash. It's cash. She was already walking. Lock the dock door behind me. First rule on the list. Then she was gone. I stood there for a minute listening to her footsteps fade, then the sound of her SUV starting up outside. The engine noise disappeared and it was just me and the hum of the work light overhead. I locked the dock door, both deadbolts, checked them twice. Then I looked at the rules. The paper was warm in my hand. I walked over to the work light so I could see better. Shift Protocol, it said at the top. Then, lock dock door after supervisor departure, both bolts. I'd already done that. Garden exit, south side ground floor, must be locked by 10:20. Verify. I checked my watch, 10:06. If PA system activates, verify map orientations in all active display zones. Use office terminal. Do not skip any. I read that one twice. I didn't know what it meant. Children's display bedroom, 2nd floor northeast, requires physical check at 1:40 exactly. Open door, confirm vacant, closed door. Do not enter. That one bugged me a little. Extension 199 will ring. Do not answer. Let it go to voicemail. Remain on premises until 5:50. Exit via dock only. Leave keys on cart. That was it. 6 rules. Some of them made sense. Some of them didn't. I folded the paper and shoved it in my jacket pocket, then picked up the flashlight and tested it. Bright. New batteries, like she said. The hallway back to the main floor was darker than I expected. The work lights only covered the bay and maybe 15 feet past it. After that, it was just my flashlight and whatever ambient glow came through the windows from the parking lot outside. I walked slowly. The floor was concrete, cracked in places, and there were cables running along the walls in loose coils. Some of them were zip-tied to the baseboards. Some just sat there in tangles. The whole place smelled like sawdust and mildew. I reached the end of the hall and stepped out into the main floor. It was gutted. That was the only word for it. The whole first story was just empty space, no walls, no displays, nothing. Just support columns every 30 feet and piles of construction material shoved against the far side. Plywood stacks, bags of concrete mix, a couple of sawhorses, The ceiling was open in places and I could see ductwork and wiring hanging down like dead vines. The windows along the front were tall, almost floor to ceiling, and they let in just enough light from the street that I could make out shapes without the flashlight. I kept it on anyway. There was a stairwell in the corner, metal railing, concrete steps. A sign next to it said, "Floors 2-4," in faded letters. I stood there for a minute, just looking around, trying to figure out what I'd gotten myself into. $250, 8 hours. Just walk around, check a few doors, don't answer a phone. It sounded fine when Eugene said it. It sounded fine when I drove over. Now I was standing in a gutted Sears box at 10 p.m. with a list of rules that didn't make sense, and a supervisor who'd left before I could ask her anything useful. I pulled the paper out again and checked the first timed item. Garden exit by 10:20. I didn't know where that was, but I had 14 minutes to find it. I started walking. The flashlight beam cut maybe 20 feet ahead, and that was it. Everything past that just kind of dissolved into black. The floor was concrete, cracked in places, and every step I took bounced back at me from somewhere across the empty space. Hollow. That's the word. The whole place sounded hollow. I kept the beam moving, sweeping left to right, trying to map it out in my head. Support columns every 30 feet or so, stacks of plywood leaning against the far wall. A pile of concrete mix bags that looked half open. Sawhorses. A couple of orange extension cords coiled up near a sheet of drywall. And then the leftovers. I didn't expect those. There were these glass cases just sitting there in the middle of the floor. Jewelry cases, I think. The kind with the sliding doors on the back and the felt-lined shelves inside. Most of them were empty. One still had a little plastic sign that said, "Watches," in faded letters. I stopped and pointed the flashlight at it for a second. The glass was dusty but not broken. Someone had just left it there. Further on, there were clothing racks, metal ones with wheels, a bunch of them clustered together near one of the columns. Some still had hangers on them, wire hangers, the cheap kind. I counted maybe 12 racks total, all staged in this weird row that didn't make sense. It looked like the store had been operating one day and then just stopped mid-shift. Everyone walked out and left everything exactly where it was. Shelving too, the kind they use for shoes or folded shirts. Modular pieces with adjustable brackets. A couple were tipped over. Most were just standing there with nothing on them. I kept moving. My boots scraped on the concrete and the sound came back at me from 3 different directions. I tried stepping lighter, but that didn't really help. The whole floor was like an echo chamber. The windows along the front let in a little light from the street. Not much. Just enough to see the outlines of things. I could make out the columns better when I got closer to that side. Saw the ductwork hanging from the open ceiling sections. Some of it was wrapped in silver insulation. Some was just bare metal. I checked my phone. 10:14. 6 minutes to find the garden exit and lock it. I angled toward the south side. That's what the rules said. South side, ground floor. I didn't have a compass, but I knew the loading dock was on the east side where I came in, so I kept the windows to my right and walked parallel to them. More construction stuff. A wheelbarrow with dried concrete stuck to the inside. A stack of 2x4s that smelled like fresh lumber, even though nothing here looked fresh. A folding table with a couple of empty coffee cups on it. Someone's work gloves sitting next to a tape measure. Then I saw the door. It was set into the wall maybe 40 feet from the nearest window. Plain metal door. No window in it, with a push bar across the middle. There was a faded sign above it that said, "Garden Courtyard," in green letters, with a little leaf graphic. The kind of sign that probably looked nice in the 90s. I walked up to it and stopped. The push bar was one of those standard panic bar setups. You push it and the door opens. Simple. I put my hand on it to test the lock and pulled back. It was warm. Not hot. Just warm. Like someone had been holding it a second ago. I stood there for a beat, flashlight in my left hand pointing at the floor, right hand still raised. I touched the bar again. Definitely warm. The metal should have been cool. Everything else in the building was cool. The air, the walls, the concrete under my boots. But the push bar felt like it had body heat in it. I checked over my shoulder. Nobody there. Just the empty floor in the dark and my own footprints in the dust behind me. Probably just residual heat from the day. That made sense. Maybe the sun had been hitting this side of the building and the metal absorbed it. Or maybe a contractor had checked it earlier and I was just being weird. I pressed the bar and heard the latch click. Locked. Good. I pulled the key ring out of my pocket and found the key that wasn't for the dock door, slid it into the deadbolt above the push bar, and turned it. The bolt slid home with a solid thunk. Still felt warm under my palm. I stepped back and looked at the door for a second. Then I remembered the masking tape. I don't know why I thought of it. It wasn't on the rules. But back when I worked venue security for a pop-up show last fall, the site lead used to tape over the emergency exit so we'd know if someone cracked them open during the event. Just a little piece across the seam. If it was broken when you checked, someone had used the door. There was a supply cart near the folding table I'd passed. I walked back and found a roll of tan masking tape sitting next to a box cutter and some pencils. I tore off a 6-inch strip and brought it back to the garden exit. I pressed it across the seam where the door met the frame, smoothed it down with my thumb. If anyone opened this door before I checked it again, I'd know. 10:18. I turned and headed back toward the stairwell. I'd seen it earlier near the loading dock hallway. The office was supposed to be on the 3rd floor, and I wanted to get up there and sit down for a minute. Maybe drink some water. I had a bottle in my jacket pocket, but I hadn't opened it yet. The stairwell was right where I remembered. Metal railing, concrete steps, the faded sign that said, "Floors 2-4." I started climbing. The steps echoed worse than the main floor. Every footfall rang out and doubled back. I kept the flashlight pointed up so I didn't trip. 2nd floor landing. I didn't stop. Kept going. 3rd floor. The door at the top had a small, wired glass window, and I could see light on the other side. I pushed through and came out into a hallway that was way brighter than downstairs. Work lights clipped to the ceiling every 15 feet or so. The walls still had drywall up here, though some sections were torn open with the studs showing, doors on both sides. Most of them closed. I found the office halfway down on the right. The door was propped open with a wooden wedge, and there was a printed paper sign taped to it that said, "Security, Temp." I walked in. It was small, maybe 10 by 12. A folding table set up as a desk with a rolling chair behind it. A metal filing cabinet in the corner with nothing on top. One of those cheap stand-up fans unplugged near the door. A window on the far wall with the blinds pulled halfway down. And the desk phone. I set the flashlight on the table and pulled my phone out. Put it on silent. Then I sat down in the chair and it squeaked under me. There was a legal pad on the table. Yellow paper, blank. A pen sitting on top of it. I figured I'd start a time log, just to stay focused. Just to have something to do. I wrote the date at the top. Then 22:06, dock door locked. Then 22:18, garden exit locked, taped. I stared at the page for a second. My handwriting looked shaky. I put the pen down. The desk phone sat there next to the legal pad. It was new. Way too new for this place. Black plastic, digital display, little buttons for different lines. It was plugged into a VoIP box on the floor under the table, the kind you use when you don't have a real phone line. Just runs through the internet. There was a laminated chart next to the phone. Extension directory. Most of the numbers were crossed out in blue ink, but one of them was circled in red marker. Extension 199. I looked at it for longer than I should have. Then I looked at the rules paper I'd pulled out of my pocket. Rule 5. Extension 199 will ring and must not be answered, letting it go to voicemail. I tried to laugh. Didn't really work. It came out more like a cough. This was the kind of thing Eugene would have thought was funny. Some inside joke from the contractors or the old staff. Maybe it was the fax line. Maybe it was a line that didn't go anywhere and they were testing me to see if I'd pick up anyway. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my eyes. The overhead lights dimmed, just for a beat, maybe 2 seconds. The work lights in the hallway dropped to about half, and the little desk lamp I hadn't noticed before flickered once. Then they came back up. Steady. Normal. I sat there waiting for the breaker click, the sound you get when power shifts or a circuit resets. Nothing, no click, no hum. Just the lights dimming and then not dimming. I checked my phone. 10:23. I wrote 22:23. Lights dimmed, no breaker sound on the legal pad. My hand was definitely shaking now. I sat there for a while, didn't move, just listened. The building was quiet, not silent. There was a low hum from somewhere, maybe the VoIP box, maybe the wiring in the walls, but no footsteps, no voices, no doors. I drank some water, checked my phone again, 10:31. The PA crackled at 11:05. I was still in the office. I'd been staring at the legal pad trying to decide if I should do a patrol or just wait until the next task on the list. The sound cut through the quiet so sharp I actually flinched. Static first, then a click, then a woman's voice. Recorded. Calm. The kind of voice they use for mall announcements. Welcome to Sears. For your convenience, please refer to the following directory. Appliances, main floor northwest. Bedding, second floor east. Children's clothing, second floor south. Electronics, main floor northeast. Garden and patio, main floor south courtyard. Hardware, lower level west. Jewelry, main floor center. Mattresses, third floor north. Men's clothing, first floor west. Shoes, second floor center. Sporting goods, lower level east. Tools, lower level northwest. Women's clothing, first floor southeast. Thank you for shopping with us today. Another click. Static. Silence. I was halfway out of the chair. I don't remember standing up. My hands were on the edge of the table and I was just frozen there, listening to nothing. The departments she listed didn't exist anymore. The store had been gutted. There was no appliances section, no bedding, no main floor northwest. I should have moved, should have done something, but I just stood there. Then I remembered the rules. Third one. If PA system activates, verify map orientations in all active display zones using office terminal without skipping any. I looked around. There was no terminal in the office, no computer, just the phone and the lamp and the legal pad. I grabbed the flashlight and walked out into the hallway. The PA voice had said appliances, main floor northwest. I headed for the stairwell, back down to the main floor, my boots on the concrete, the echo coming back. I swept the flashlight across the empty space and tried to orient myself, northwest. That'd be front left if the loading dock was east. I started walking. The beam caught the clothing racks first, then the jewelry cases, then a big open area near the windows where there was nothing but dust and a couple of tarps folded in the corner. Appliances would have been here, washers, dryers, fridges, all gone now. I stood there between where appliances would have been and where bedding would have been on the second floor, directly above me. My eyes were down. I was counting. 1, 2, 3. I got to 15 seconds and heard something shift above me. Not a footstep, not a creak, just a shift, something moving slow and careful across the drop ceiling on the second floor. I kept counting. 16, 17. Dust started falling. Little bits at first, then more. It sifted down through a gap in the ductwork above me and landed on my shoulders, on my sleeves. I felt it hit the radio clipped to my belt. I kept my eyes down and finished the count. 60. The shifting stopped. I stood there in the dark with dust on my jacket and my radio, flashlight beam pointed at my boots, listening to the silence where the sound had been. I stood there for probably another minute trying to convince myself. The PA announcement was just a leftover test file, something the contractors were running to check the speaker system before they tore it out. That made sense. That was the kind of thing that happened in buildings like this. But at 11:17, it played again. Shorter this time. The click came first, then static, then the same woman's voice, but the order was different. She started with electronics, main floor northeast, then jumped to bedding second floor east, then back to appliances, main floor northwest. The list wasn't alphabetical anymore. It wasn't floor by floor either. It was rearranged, like someone had shuffled the cards and dealt them out in a new pattern, like it was correcting itself. The static cut off halfway through sporting goods, and the silence came back hard. I was already moving before I decided to, following the sound toward where housewares would have been if this place still had departments. My boots scraped on concrete and the echo doubled back at me from the windows. The flashlight beam swung across empty floor, a stack of drywall sheets, more extension cords in a tangled pile. Then I saw them. Mirrors. A whole row of them, full-length mirrors still in their frames, propped against a support column about 40 feet from the stairwell. 6 of them, maybe 7. The kind you'd find in a fitting room or a bedroom display. Someone had stacked them there for removal, leaning them at an angle so they wouldn't tip. I stopped walking. The beam hit the glass and reflected back at me, turning my flashlight into a bright smudge in the center of the closest mirror. I could see myself in there. Dark hoodie, security jacket, the flashlight in my right hand. Behind me, the store stretched out in the reflection. The support columns, the windows along the front, the construction materials piled against the far wall. Except it looked brighter. Not a lot. Just enough that I noticed. In the mirror, the store had more light than it should have, like there were work lamps on somewhere I couldn't see. The windows looked cleaner, too. Less grime. And there was a shape. Tall. Standing near where linens would have been, in the reflected aisles that didn't exist anymore. It didn't move. It just stood there, about 60 feet back in the mirror, a dark vertical line that was too narrow to be a column and too tall to be anything I'd seen on the floor. I spun around fast. My flashlight cut through the space behind me and hit nothing. Just empty floor. Just dust hanging in the beam. The windows were dark and smudged the way they'd been all night, and there wasn't a single shape standing anywhere near where linens would have been. I turned back to the mirrors. The shape was gone from the reflection, too. I stood there breathing harder than I should have been, aiming the flashlight at the glass. My reflection stared back at me. The store behind me in the mirror looked the same as the real store now. Same darkness, same grime on the windows. I didn't go closer to check. I walked back toward the stairwell and didn't look at the mirrors again. After that, midnight passed in a calm stretch that almost let me relax. I went back up to the office, sat in the squeaking chair and added 2317 PA replay, different order to the legal pad. My handwriting looked steadier than it had for the first entry. That bugged me a little. It should have been shakier. I drank more water from the bottle I'd brought and checked my watch every few minutes. 12:03, 12:11, 12:21. The work lights stayed steady. The building stayed quiet. I could hear traffic outside, faint and distant, and it sounded normal enough that I started thinking maybe the rest of the night would be easy, which is exactly when I made a mistake. I got up from the chair, took the flashlight, and went back downstairs to check on the garden exit. I didn't have a reason. The tape was still there as far as I knew, and the lock had been solid when I tested it earlier, but I wanted to see it again. Confirm it. That's what I told myself. I walked across the main floor, past the jewelry cases and the clothing racks, past the mirrors I didn't look at, and found the door right where I'd left it. The masking tape was still in place, a pale strip across the seam. I reached out and peeled it off. The adhesive made a soft, sticky sound. Then I tested the lock. I didn't turn the deadbolt. I just pressed my palm against the push bar to make sure it was secure, the way I'd done at the venue gigs when I checked the side exits during my rounds. The door opened an inch, just an inch, on its own. I wasn't pushing hard, barely any pressure at all, but the door moved inward like something on the other side had been waiting for contact. Cold air pushed against my knuckles. It didn't feel like wind. It felt like a breath, deliberate and slow, coming through the gap with enough force that I felt it on my wrist too. I shoved the door shut, both palms flat against the metal. It closed with a solid thunk, and I stood there pressing my weight into it, staring at the seam where the tape had been. The latch clicked. Small sound. Quiet. Metal on metal. It made me think of teeth. I pulled the tape out of my pocket, smoothed it back across the seam, and pressed it down harder than I needed to. Then I stood there for probably 30 seconds just watching the door, waiting to see if it would move again. It didn't. I walked back to the stairwell, climbed to the 3rd floor, and sat down in the office chair. My hands were shaking a little. I didn't write it in the log. At 12:33, the desk phone rang. The sound cut through the quiet like a blade. Sharp. Loud. The digital display lit up green and showed 3 numbers. Extension 102, not 199. I stared at it. The phone rang again, vibrating slightly on the folding table. Rule 5 said extension 199 would ring and I shouldn't answer it. But this wasn't 199. This was 102, and I didn't see that number anywhere on the laminated directory chart. The phone rang a 3rd time. I picked it up before I could stop myself. "Yeah," I said. The line crackled. Static, faint and thin, like the connection was stretched too far. Then a voice came through. "This is Audrey." It sounded like her. Same flat tone, same impatient edge. But there was something off about it, something I couldn't name. The words were right, but the spacing was wrong, like she was reading from a script she'd only seen once. "Okay," I said. "Loading dock will be blocked at dawn," she said. "Use the front doors instead." I opened my mouth to ask why or when, or if she meant the main entrance with the plywood, but before I got a word out, the line changed. A wet cough, low and thick. Not Audrey's voice. Deeper. It rattled through the receiver and then cut into line noise, a hiss that spiked and fell and spiked again before the call ended with a click. I sat there holding the phone to my ear, listening to dead air. Then I set it back in the cradle and stared at the display until the green light faded. I wished I hadn't picked up. I wrote it down. 033. Call from Ext. 102. Voice said loading dock blocked at dawn. Use front doors. The pen stayed in my hand for a second after I finished. I looked at the words on the yellow pad and wished I hadn't put them there. That's stupid. Probably. It already happened whether I wrote it or not. But something about seeing it in ink made it feel permanent. Real. Like I was agreeing that the voice on the phone had actually been Audrey and the cough had actually been something else, and both those things could be true at the same time. I set the pen down and leaned back in the chair. It squeaked. The work light stayed steady overhead. My watch said 12:41. I had about an hour before the children's bedroom check at 1:40. Rule 4. The one that said I had to open the door, confirm it was vacant, and close it without going inside. I hadn't been up to the 2nd floor yet except to pass it on the stairs. Didn't know where the bedroom was or what it looked like. Figured I should go find it soon, so I wasn't rushing at 1:39. But I didn't get up. I just sat there looking at the phone. The display had gone dark. It looked normal now. Just a cheap plastic desk phone with a coiled cord running to the VoIP box under the table. I kept thinking about the spacing in Audrey's voice, the way the words came out wrong, not her cadence. And then the cough, wet and thick, like it had come from somewhere deep. I pulled the laminated directory closer and ran my finger down the list. Extension 102 wasn't on it. Neither were most of the numbers. Someone had crossed them out in blue ink, leaving only a dozen or so. Extension 199 was circled in red. That was the one I wasn't supposed to answer. I wondered what would happen if 199 called. Probably nothing. Probably it'd just ring and I'd let it go to voicemail like the rule said, and that'd be it. But my hands felt cold thinking about it. I drank some water, checked my watch again. 12:46. The PA crackled at 1:04. I was still in the office. I'd been staring at the legal pad, trying to decide if I should add a note about the garden exit door opening on its own. I hadn't written that part down earlier. Didn't want to. Same reason I didn't want to write about the phone call, except I did write that one and now it was sitting there in ink. The static came first, same as before. Then the click. Then the woman's voice. "Welcome to Sears. Our departments are located as follows." I stood up halfway, hands flat on the table. Jewelry, 4th floor north. Bedding, lower level west. Appliances, 2nd floor courtyard. Men's clothing, main floor center. Garden and patio, 3rd floor east. Electronics. I stopped listening to the words and started counting the floors. 4th floor north, lower level west, 2nd floor courtyard. There was no 4th floor. I'd seen the stairwell sign. It only went to 4, but the building itself was 4 stories, and the top floor was offices and storage, not retail. And there was no courtyard on the 2nd floor. The courtyard was outside, ground level, behind the garden exit door. The voice kept going. Sporting goods, main floor south, mattresses, lower level center, hardware, 2nd floor west, children's clothing, 3rd floor northeast, shoes. It wasn't random this time. It wasn't just a different order. The departments were in places that didn't exist, or places that couldn't exist. I thought about the PA playing twice before with the lists rearranged, and figured maybe it was cycling through old recordings, different versions from different years when they'd moved departments around. But that didn't explain 4th floor north or 2nd floor courtyard. The announcement ended with the same click and static. I stood there with my hands still on the table, breathing carefully. Then I remembered Rule 3. Verify map orientations in all active display zones using the office terminal. There wasn't a terminal. I'd already checked. The office had a desk, a chair, a fan, a filing cabinet, and a phone. No computer, no monitor. Nothing with a screen except my watch. I looked around the room again anyway. Same 10 by 12 space, same folding table and squeaking chair, same stand-up fan in the corner, unplugged, dusty, no terminal. I sat back down and wrote 01 to 04, PA again. Department's wrong. Floors don't match building. My handwriting looked steady. That bothered me a little. I felt like it should have been shaky. I got up and left the office at 1:13. Took the flashlight, left the water bottle. The hallway was quiet. Work lights every 15 feet clipped to the ceiling, casting long shadows where the drywall was torn open. I walked to the stairwell and went down to the main floor. The PA had said to verify map orientations. I didn't know what that meant, but I figured I should at least walk through the departments it had listed. See if anything was there. Maybe there were display zones I'd missed. I crossed the main floor toward the south side where it had said sporting goods was supposed to be. My boots echoed on the concrete. The flashlight beam swept across the jewelry cases, the clothing racks, the stacks of plywood against the far wall. I kept walking. Steady pace, didn't rush. And then I heard it. Footsteps, right behind me, matching my pace exactly. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I stood there with the flashlight pointed at the floor about 10 feet ahead. My heart was doing something fast and uneven in my chest. I didn't turn around. I remembered the PA announcement, the one that had played while I was standing in the appliances section. I'd counted to 60 and heard something shifting in the drop ceiling above me. I wondered if that was the rule. if the building wanted me to stay still and count. So I did. I kept my eyes on the flashlight beam and started counting in my head. 1, 2, 3. The footsteps started again. I wasn't moving. I was completely still, boots flat on the concrete, flashlight steady in my hand. But the footsteps kept going. Same rhythm I'd been walking. Boot sole on concrete, 1, 2, 1, 2, getting closer. 4, 5, 6. They were right behind me now, close enough that I should have felt a presence, body heat, breath. I didn't feel anything, just heard the steps. 7, 8, 9. I thought about turning around. I thought about running. I didn't do either. I kept counting. 10, 11, 12. The footsteps stopped again, but I could still hear something. A faint sound, almost like fabric shifting. Like someone standing there adjusting their weight. 13, 14, 15. My hands were shaking now. The flashlight beam wobbled a little. I tightened my grip. 20, 30, 40. Nothing moved. The footsteps didn't start again. I kept counting. 50, 55, 60. I turned around. There wasn't a person. Just floor. Concrete, cracked, dusty. The same floor I'd been walking across all night. Except I pointed the flashlight down at the ground right behind where I'd been standing. Footprints, fresh ones. Clear boot treads in the dust, coming from the direction of the stairwell, stopping exactly at the back of my boots, right where the footsteps had been. I took a step back. The prints stayed where they were. They didn't keep going. They didn't fade. They just ended. 2 boot prints in the dust, toes pointed at my heels. I stared at them for probably 10 seconds. Then I turned around and walked to the stairwell. Didn't run, didn't look back. At 1:35, I was climbing the stairs to the 2nd floor. My watch said I had 5 minutes before the bedroom check. I figured that was enough time to find it. The 2nd floor hallway had fewer work lights than the 3rd. They were spaced farther apart, maybe every 20 feet, and some of them were flickering. The walls were finished drywall, painted beige with dark rectangles where signs used to hang. The floor was linoleum tile, scuffed and peeling in places. I walked down the hallway checking doors. Most of them were locked. A few opened into empty rooms, storage closets, break rooms, offices with desks and filing cabinets left behind. I passed a drinking fountain that was still bolted to the wall, past a bulletin board with nothing pinned to it. At the end of the hallway, northeast corner, I found a door with a faded sign that said, Home Display Children's. I stopped in front of it, checked my watch, 1:39. Close enough. I turned the handle. The door wasn't locked. It swung open into a small room, maybe 12 by 15, set up like a kid's bedroom. There was a white crib against the far wall under a mural of clouds and stars. A rocking chair in the corner. A bookshelf with a few plastic toys still on it. The walls were pale blue. I'd been past this room earlier. I didn't remember when. Maybe around 11, right after Audrey left, when I was getting oriented. I'd glanced inside and seen the crib full of stuffed animals. A whole pile of them. Bears, rabbits, something that might have been a giraffe. It had made me think of my nephew for a second. He's 3. Loves stuffed animals. Now the crib was empty. Completely empty. Bare mattress, clean and smooth like it had just been made. No animals, no blankets, nothing. I stood in the doorway with the flashlight pointed at the crib. The beam didn't waver. My hand was steady. I thought maybe I'd misremembered. Maybe it had been a different room. Or maybe the stuffed animals had been on the bookshelf, not in the crib, and I'd gotten it mixed up. But I knew that wasn't true. I backed out of the room and pulled the door shut. It clicked softly. Then I started walking, fast. Not running, but faster than I'd been moving all night. I was leaving. That was it. I didn't care about the $250. I didn't care about the rules or the log or verifying map orientations or any of it. I was going back to the third floor, grabbing my water bottle, going down to the loading dock, unlocking the door, and getting in my car. The building could do whatever it wanted after that. I reached the stairwell and went down. My boots hit the steps harder than they needed to. I got to the main floor and turned toward the loading dock hallway, except the hallway wasn't there. I stopped. Where the hallway should have been, where it had been every other time I'd come down the stairs, there was just wall. Drywall. Beige. Same as the second floor. And in front of the wall, blocking the whole section, was a row of mirrors. The same mirrors I'd seen earlier near housewares, full length in frames, propped at an angle. But there were more of them now, maybe a dozen. And they were arranged differently, lined up across the corridor like a barricade. I walked closer, pointed the flashlight at them. Every single mirror showed the same thing. The garden exit door, wide open, darkness beyond it, thick and flat, like the courtyard had been painted black. I turned around, looked at the actual floor behind me. The garden exit was 40 feet to the south. I couldn't see it from here, but I knew it was there. Knew I'd locked it. Knew I'd taped it shut twice. I looked back at the mirrors, still showing the door, still open. From somewhere deeper in the building, maybe the third floor, maybe farther, the desk phone started ringing. It rang again. And again. Steady, rhythmic, like a pulse. Like it was calling for me specifically. I stood there in front of the mirrors, flashlight in one hand, the ringing cutting through the silence. It didn't stop. The phone kept ringing. I stood there in front of the mirrors with the flashlight beam shaking because my hand was shaking, and part of me wanted to just go back up the stairs and answer the damn thing. Make it stop. That was the worst part, probably. Not the mirrors or the hallway that wasn't there anymore, or even the garden door standing open in every single reflection. It was the ringing, steady and normal and something I knew how to fix. I didn't go back. I made myself look down at the floor instead. Concrete, cracked in places with that spiderweb pattern you get when the foundation settles wrong. And there was a painted yellow line about 4 inches wide running along the right side of the space, the kind contractors use to mark forklift routes or loading zones. I'd seen it earlier when Audrey walked me through. Bright yellow, industrial paint, the type that takes forever to wear off even with heavy traffic. I kept my eyes on that line. The phone was still ringing. I started walking, following the yellow stripe back toward where the loading dock hallway should be. Had to be. I didn't look up. Didn't check if the mirrors were still there or if the wall had changed back or any of it. Just the line. 4 inches of paint on concrete that somebody put down maybe 6 months ago when they started the renovation work. Back when this was just a normal dead mall getting gutted for condos or office space or whatever they were planning. My boot stayed on the right side of the line. Left boot, right boot, steady pace, not running. The phone kept ringing behind me and I could hear it getting a little farther away with each step, which meant I was moving in the right direction probably. The hallway felt wrong in my peripheral vision. I'm not sure how to describe it. The walls seemed closer on one side and farther on the other, and the work lights that should have been clipped every 15 feet or so were flickering in patterns that didn't match anything electrical. But I didn't look up to confirm. Just the yellow line. Just the painted yellow line on cracked concrete with some dust and a few old zip ties somebody dropped during cable work. I passed one of those orange extension cords coiled near the baseboard. Noticed a contractor's glove on the floor, the canvas kind with rubber grips. A crushed energy drink can, normal stuff. Proof people had worked here during daylight hours doing regular construction things. The ringing stopped. I kept walking, didn't speed up or slow down. The silence felt worse than the ringing honestly, but I wasn't about to go back and check why it quit. At one point, the yellow line curved slightly to avoid a section where the concrete had buckled. creating a little ridge about 2 inches high. I stepped over it and kept going. My flashlight beam stayed pointed down and forward, just enough to see the next 10 feet of painted stripe. The rest of the hallway existed somewhere in the dark above and around me, but I wasn't confirming that. I checked my watch without lifting my wrist too high. 3:10. The loading dock door should have been another 30 feet ahead based on the distance I'd walked from the stairwell originally. The yellow line kept going straight. I followed it. And then I saw the door. Same metal door Audrey had propped open when I arrived. Same dock bay setup with the concrete loading platform and the service road beyond. Except there was a chain looped across the handle. Thick silver links. The heavy-duty kind you'd use for a motorcycle or a storage unit, wrapped maybe 3 times through the interior push bar and around the frame bracket. Pulled tight. Secured from the inside. I stopped about 5 feet back. The chain hadn't been there when I locked the door earlier. I turned both deadbolts, checked them twice. There wasn't any chain, just the bolts and the handle. I stood there staring at it for probably 15 seconds, trying to figure out if I'd missed it somehow. If maybe there'd been a chain sitting on the floor nearby and something had wrapped it while I was upstairs. But that didn't make sense. Nobody else was here. That was the whole point of the job. Overnight watch because the building was empty and acting up and they needed someone on site. The chain was definitely real. I could see where the links caught the light from my flashlight, dull metal with a few rust spots near the bottom. I turned and looked back the way I'd come. The hallway was just a hallway. Beige drywall walls, work lights clipped to the ceiling, concrete floor with the yellow painted line running back toward the main floor. No mirrors, no impossible wall blocking the path. Just normal empty hallway that smelled like dust and that chemical floor sealer they use during construction. I turned back to the door. There was a contractor's cart about 10 feet to my left, one of those rolling metal things with 2 shelves. I'd noticed it earlier in the night. It had some supplies on it, the kind of stuff work crews leave on site between shifts. I walked over and checked the bottom shelf. Zip ties, a coil of yellow caution tape, work gloves, a claw hammer, and a pair of bolt cutters with red rubber handles. I grabbed the bolt cutters. They were heavier than I expected, maybe 3 pounds, with long handles for leverage. I'd used this type before at a venue gig back in October when we had to cut a padlock off an equipment cage after somebody lost the key. Same basic idea. I positioned the cutters on one of the middle chain links, the metal jaws fitting around it with a solid click. Squeezed the handles together. The chain resisted for a second, then the link sheared through with a sharp metallic snap that echoed across the loading bay and probably out into the main floor behind me. The chain fell away and hit the concrete with a rattling clatter that seemed way too loud, and the PA system came on. Not the static and click from before. This time it was immediate, no warning, just the woman's voice at full volume blasting through speakers I still hadn't located. The same facility map announcement. Appliances, bedding, electronics, garden, and patio. But then it shifted, started listing exits. Emergency exits located at main entrance, garden courtyard, loading dock, northwest stairwell access, employee corridor sublevel. I froze. Stood there with the bolt cutter still in my hand, blade jaws open, listening. The voice kept going. Routes now. Proceed to nearest marked exit. Loading dock accessible via main floor east corridor. Loading dock accessible via service hallway. Loading dock. It repeated that part. Loading dock, loading dock, loading dock. Just those 2 words over and over, the same inflection each time, no variation. Like a recording stuck on a loop, but with perfect clarity. Not skipping or distorted, just repeating. I counted, got to 60. The voice kept saying it. Loading dock, loading dock. I needed to freeze for a minute. That was the thing from before. From the footsteps and the shifting sound in the ceiling. Stay still for 60 seconds and whatever it was would stop. Except I'd already been standing here for a full minute and the PA wasn't stopping. That was when I felt it. Breath on the back of my neck, not wind, not air movement from a vent or a draft through the dock door. Breath. Warm and slow and deliberate. Close enough that I could feel it disturb the fabric of my hood where it bunched against my collar. I didn't move. Kept my eyes forward on the door with the broken chain at my feet. The breath came again. Same spot, same warmth. I felt dust shift on my collar, the particles moving in a way that only happens when air hits them directly. Loading dock, loading dock, loading dock. I counted to 60 again. Didn't let myself turn around or swing the flashlight or do anything except stand there with the bolt cutters getting heavy in my right hand and my left hand holding the flashlight pointed at the door. At 60, the PA cut off, just stopped mid-word. Loading D, and then nothing. The breath stopped too. I waited another 5 seconds to be sure, then turned around. The mirrors were back. Same full-length mirrors in frames, propped at an angle to form a barricade across the hallway about 15 feet behind where I was standing. I didn't remember hearing them get moved or set up. They were just there. And in every single mirror, I could see my reflection. Dark hoodie, security jacket, flashlight in left hand, bolt cutters in right. Standing in the loading dock hallway facing the mirrors. Except directly behind my reflection, maybe 6 inches back, was another me. Same clothes, same posture, same everything. Standing so close our shoulders were almost touching. Close enough that I should have been able to feel someone there, should have felt them when I turned around. I looked at the actual hallway behind me, empty, just concrete and yellow paint and scattered construction supplies. Looked back at the mirrors. Both versions of me still there, one behind the other. The second one's face, exactly level with mine. My radio screen lit up, bright green rectangle clipped to my belt, casting a glow against my jacket. I glanced down without moving my head much. Incoming alert. Extension 199. And from somewhere up on the 3rd floor, the desk phone started ringing again. Same rhythm as before. Steady, patient, waiting. The radio and the phone were perfectly synchronized. Ring. Pause. Ring. Pause. I kept my hands exactly where they were. Didn't reach for the radio. Didn't touch the phone. Didn't acknowledge either device. Just started backing toward the loading dock door, one step at a time, keeping my eyes on the yellow line painted on the floor because that was real. That was still real. The paint was there. The door was behind me. The line proved the path forward existed. I kept backing up. I opened the dock door and stepped into the bay. The concrete under my boots felt solid, real. I could see the loading platform edge about 8 feet ahead where it dropped down to the service road, and beyond that the chain link fence separating the lot from the access alley. Everything looked normal. Gray pre-dawn light, no movement, air cold enough to sting my throat when I breathed in. I stayed there in the doorway with one hand still on the push bar. The bolt cutters were on the floor behind me where I dropped them after cutting the chain. The broken links were gone. I didn't look for them. The PA system kicked on again, not static this time. Just Audrey's voice, flat and careful, same as the phone call earlier. Loading dock will be blocked at dawn, she said. Use the front doors instead. Pause. Click. Then it repeated. Loading dock will be blocked at dawn. Use the front doors instead. Same exact spacing, same tone, like she was reading off a card and somebody had looped the recording. It didn't sound wrong exactly, just too steady, too even. The real Audrey got impatient when you asked questions. This version didn't get impatient. Didn't get anything. I thought about the phone call at 12:33, extension 102. The voice telling me to use the front doors. The cough that came after. Yeah, that had been a setup. The PA kept going. 3rd loop. 4th. I turned around and looked back into the hallway. The mirrors were still there, lined up against the wall where the loading corridor should have been. I could see my reflection in the nearest one. Dark hoodie, security jacket, flashlight in my left hand pointing down at the concrete. I didn't look past my own reflection, didn't check what was behind me in the glass. The announcement stopped mid-sentence. Loading dock will be blocked at... Silence. I stayed in the doorway. My watch said 4:12. Hour and 38 minutes left. I figured I could wait it out right here. Bay door open behind me, hallway in front. If something moved, I'd see it. If the door tried to close, I could get through it. Probably. The rules said to stay on premises until 5:50. Didn't say where on premises. The loading bay counted. I walked back into the hallway just far enough to grab the bolt cutters off the floor, then returned to the bay and positioned myself against the left wall where I had concrete at my back and a clear view of both the door and the corridor. The wall was cold through my jacket. I didn't care. 4:17. 4:23. The work lights stayed on, flickering a little, but on. 4:31. I needed to check the office monitor. That thought just appeared fully formed, and I didn't like it. But Rule 3 had mentioned verifying map orientations using the office terminal. There wasn't a computer in the office. But there'd been a phone, a lamp, a fan. Maybe there was a monitor I'd missed. I didn't want to go back up there. But I also didn't want to stand here for another hour and 20 minutes wondering if I'd missed something that mattered. 4:34. I walked back down the hallway, past the mirrors. Didn't look at them. Took the stairwell up to 3, boots loud on the metal steps. The third-floor hallway looked the same. Work lights clipped every 15 feet. Drywall walls. The security office door still propped open with the wooden wedge. I went in and checked the desk. Phone, lamp, legal pad with my log entries, water bottle. Then I turned and saw the monitor. It was on the filing cabinet. Small screen, maybe 10 inches, black plastic casing. I'd walked past that cabinet 6 or 7 times tonight and never noticed it. The screen was off, but the power light at the bottom edge glowed green. I touched the mouse next to it. Wireless thing, batteries probably half dead. The screen came on, 4 camera feeds in a grid. Top left, main floor looking east toward the stairwell. Top right, second floor hallway outside the children's bedroom. Bottom left, third floor hallway right outside this office. Bottom right, ground floor south side, the garden exit. I leaned in. The feed was grainy, black and white. Timestamp in the corner reading 0437. The door was closed. Masking tape across the seam, same as I'd left it. Then it wasn't. The deadbolt turned. No hand on it. Just the bolt sliding back into the unlocked position with a smooth motion like someone had used the key from the inside. The push bar depressed. The door swung open, slow and controlled, until it stopped at about 40 degrees. Nothing came through. Just darkness outside. Flat black. Same as I'd seen in the mirrors earlier. Nobody was near that door. The feed showed the whole section of wall. Empty floor, stacks of plywood, the door open. I stepped back from the monitor. The garden exit was a lure. The front doors were a lure. The phone call had been trying to move me somewhere specific. The loading dock was the real exit, the one I'd been told to lock first, the one the PA announcement kept repeating. I checked my watch. 4:41. I sat down in the chair and pulled the legal pad toward me. Wrote 0437. Garden exit unlocked itself. Saw it on monitor. Staying in bay until 0550. My handwriting looked normal. Steady enough. That bothered me a little. 4:53. 5:08. I went back downstairs, past the mirrors again, and returned to the loading bay. Positioned myself against the concrete wall, bolt cutters on the floor next to my right boot, flashlight in my left hand. The bay door was still open, cold air coming through. I could see the fence, the alley, a street light about half a block down flickering on and off. 5:19. 5:27. My phone was still in the car. I wondered if it was buzzing. Probably. Same 3 numbers. Collections, lender, maybe the credit line, 534, 541. The PA system stayed quiet. No footsteps, no shifting sounds. The work lights hummed. 5:48. I checked the door frame where the chain had been. Just the push bar and the deadbolts I'd locked earlier. No loops of silver links, no rust spots, nothing on the floor either. I looked at my watch. 5:49. The bay stayed quiet. I counted to 60, then checked again. 5:50. I picked up the bolt cutters, stepped through the door, and walked across the loading platform to the steps leading down to the service road. My car was parked about 40 feet away, same spot I'd left it. Gray Honda, driver's door facing me, gaslight probably still on. The air smelled like exhaust and wet pavement. Normal Portland morning, cold enough that I could see my breath. I heard a car door shut. Audrey was standing next to a white JLL SUV parked near the fence. Same sight jacket, same ponytail, clipboard in one hand, and a thick manila envelope in the other. She looked me over for about 3 seconds, then made a mark on the clipboard. "You stayed the whole shift," she said. "Yeah." She held out the envelope. I took it. The weight felt right. Cash, probably $250 like Eugene promised. "Any issues?" I thought about the PA announcements, the footsteps, the mirrors, the garden exit unlocking itself on the monitor, the chain that disappeared. "No," I said. She made another mark. "Keys." I'd left them on the cart inside like the rules said. On the cart, loading bay. "Fine." She tucked the clipboard under her arm. "You're marked complete. Eugene'll call if there's another shift." I nodded, didn't say I wouldn't take it. She got in the SUV and drove off, didn't wave. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, then walked to my car and got in. The envelope went in the cup holder where my phone had been buzzing all week. I checked the phone. 17 missed calls. I turned it off again. The engine started on the second try. Gaslight still on. I had enough to make it to Gresham. I drove straight east on 84th, then cut over to Powell. Traffic was light. 6:40 by the time I pulled into the lot behind Thelma Richardson's office building. Small place, 2 stories, tan siding. Her office was on the first floor, but she had a drop slot in the exterior door for after-hours payments. I counted out $500 from the envelope. Rent was $450, but I was 3 days away from the late fee kicking in, and I didn't want to cut it close. I put the bills in one of the pre-printed envelopes she'd given me back in September, wrote my unit number on the line, and fed it through the slot. Metal flap, quick drop, gone. That left me with $70 in the envelope. Enough for gas and maybe 2 grocery runs if I was careful. I sat in the car for a minute. The rules sheet was still in my jacket pocket, folded twice. I pulled it out and looked at it. 6 rules, numbered, printed on plain white paper. Normal ink, normal paper. I drove home. My apartment was 15 minutes south, ground floor unit in a complex off Foster. I parked, went inside, and locked the door behind me. The sink was small, but it'd work. I turned on the fan above the stove, unfolded the paper, and held it over the burner. Clicked the ignition. Flame came on. I touched the corner of the sheet to the fire. Nothing happened. The paper heated up. I could feel it getting warm between my fingers, but it didn't brown, didn't curl, didn't catch. I held it there for 15 seconds. 20. The burner was on high. I'd lit newspaper this way before. Birthday cards, receipts, paper burned. This didn't. I turned off the burner and ran cold water over my fingers where they'd been too close to the flame. Then I looked at the rules sheet. No scorch marks, no discoloration. It looked exactly the same. I tore it in half, then in half again. Kept going until I had pieces about the size of a business card, maybe smaller. My hands were shaking a little, but I got through the whole thing. 40, 50 pieces, scattered on the counter. I scooped them into the toilet and flushed. The water spun, drained, refilled. The pieces were gone. I flushed 3 more times, twice with nothing in the bowl, just to be sure. Then I checked the counter, the sink, the floor. No pieces left. I went to the couch and sat down. Put my phone on the coffee table, still powered off. The envelope with $70 went in the drawer under the TV where I kept bills. My hands stopped shaking after a while. I kept the phone off for 2 days. When I finally turned it on, the calls had stopped.